How's it going, folks? Jack here with another video here to check out a recommendation straight from the Discord on the Kurzgesagt channel, or better known as In a Nutshell. And they are famous for always finding a way to give us an existential crisis, and with this one, they went full throttle. As this aptly named, this video might save 58 lives next week. Already have the notice for the self-deletion hotline here, and you need to accept to watch it because it contains things about self-harm. I know that I'm circumventing using the actual term here, but it's YouTube, and also this is a very poignant topic that I think we tend to avoid talking about. It's still kind of taboo, at least among certain circles, mostly for men. I remember 4 months ago making an actual video about it, and yeah, I think it's something that is worth talking about, and this is why I wanted to share this one especially. And of course, because it was recommended to me on my Discord. So without further ado, get into it.
Let's save your life today. Not long term, today. By specifically finding out what's most likely to kill you next week so you can actually avoid it. First, let's assume that 3 million people will watch this video and that you're all among our typical viewers. You're between the ages of 15 and 35 and you're living in Western countries.
Yeah, straight from the YouTube algorithm, I guess, or analytics. And judging from the view count so far, the 3 million mark has been hit. And yeah, we're gonna assume that they are mostly from Western countries.
We based this video on statistics specifically for your demographic and our own estimates.
Okay.
They're not perfect, but roughly correct. Don't worry, we might also save your life if you're older or live somewhere else. Okay, now let's gather all 3 million of you in 40 packed football stadiums. Look around. Most of you are teens and young adults. So much potential. Unfortunately, by the end of next week, 58 of you watching right now will not be alive anymore. 3,000 of you will sadly have passed in a year. That's 1 in 1,000.
Yeah.
Or not. Today, we will save your, yes, your life by looking at the avoidable ways you might die. We'll not cover long-term things like diseases because we want to prevent your death next week.
Okay, yeah. A thing that often is avoided is the somewhat mundane things, at least to our understanding, mundane, that affects our lives. Because if we're focusing on, let's say, the Western part of the world, things that are often affecting us are things like heart diseases, cancer, respiratory illnesses, diabetes, yes, poignant with regards to the previous video they made, and of course, accidents, which are rather high. Now, granted, of course, when it comes to diseases, these are rather long term, and accidents will likely be a thing that is a bit more immediate.
Your life consists of millions of micro decisions, and some of you are on a path that will end soon. Can we guide you down a different path? Humans are incredibly bad at judging the real risks of life. Bad things happen to people all the time because there are so many of us. And since the news focuses so much on freak accidents, we have a completely distorted picture of what actually poses a danger to us.
The GoPro on a selfie stick before is a wild callback to some of the weirdest, wacky deaths that happened in the previous decade. From, the selfie lightning rod to people dying in ravines and cliff sides. More people in the last decade died of taking selfies than they died of shark attacks. That's a fun fact for you.
For example, the chance any of you are going to die in a terror attack is below 0.0002%. There are super risky activities that are clearly insanely dangerous, like wingsuit flying. If all 3 million of you were to practice this sport, about 285 of you would die just next week. Then there are things that are pretty dangerous. If all of you rode a motorcycle, 35 of you would not survive next week. If you don't want this kind of risk in your life, well, don't do these things. It turns out what's most likely to kill you next week are things that feel safe, that you do all the time and are routine, things you may even be really good at. This is what we'll prevent. By far the most dangerous thing you're currently doing is driving.
Of course.
8 of you will die in a car crash just next week. 416 of you over the next year. Mostly because most of you are not aware what driving really is. You're zooming through the world in a metal torpedo at the speed of a cheetah or faster. In an average car that weighs 1.5 tons at roughly 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles an hour, you have the mechanical energy of a piano dropped from the top of the Statue of Liberty.
Call back to a fun math piece that we did in a gaming related video. I think it was on it was the Sonic campaign. With a normal car like this one driving at 60 kilometers an hour will have enough kinetic energy as an elephant dropping onto you from, I think, was a height of 20 meters or perhaps a little bit more. Oh, did I say kinetic energy? I meant mechanical energy. My bad.
If you crash, this energy is released into your car and, more importantly, your body. 30% of deadly car accidents are caused by speeding, mostly because you overestimate yourself.
That is one of the reasons why Teslas, as an example, are insanely bad of a vehicle to have. Not here to shit on Tesla specifically, or Tesla owners, okay? It's not you guys. It's because of the deformation factor of a car, which is supposed to disperse a lot of the energy on an impact, which often they do not. That's why something as the Cybertruck, which we discussed in a previous stream, is one hell of a hazard to drive in.
But that will kill 2 of you next week. It's very straightforward. If you go fast, you have less time to react and only notice the danger when it's too late.
Yeah.
A lot of you watching tend to go with the speed limit regularly, which saves very little time. If your destination is 20 minutes away at 100 kilometers an hour or 60 miles an hour, driving 15 kilometers an hour or 10 miles an hour faster will save less than 3 minutes. But your probability of a deadly crash increases by 60%. So 2 of you may survive next week if you just tone down your speeding. This alone would eliminate the most dangerous activity in your life. Isn't this wild?
Yeah.
Close second is drinking alcohol and
As a last little addition to the driving one, I attended a lecture by this philosopher and also writer, Vincent F. Hendricks, who wrote a book about like the social contracts that we make on a daily basis that we tend to forget about. Because some of you might be familiar with game theory, which is like this theory about how we optimize our chances of making the right choices on a daily, right? The advantages and disadvantages that comes with acting in a certain way. But the discussion itself was all around how much we're willing to trust one another. Are we trusting politicians? Are we trusting our neighbor or stranger outside? And more often than not, we don't really do that. However, when we're stepping into a murder weapon, like a car, we all have this kind of unknown contract that we are behaving correctly on the road, that we know how to blink our lights, that we know to slow down the speed when we need to make a turn and stuff like that. So there are implicit factors that also come into play here in our perception of are we actually going to hurt each other or not, and what is dangerous.
Driving, causing 25% of deadly crashes. In the next week, this will also kill 2 of you. You don't even need to feel drunk, you just have to have consumed enough to slow your reaction time.
Or that.
Even if you still feel completely in control, chances are high that you're not. Aside from being extremely illegal, it's one of the most reckless and dangerous things too many people do regularly.
Yeah.
And it's easy to avoid. Just don't do it, ever. Taking a cab after that work event next week, even if you only had 2 drinks, might save your life.
It might be expensive, but it's less expensive than dying or being stuck in the hospital, having to pay some bills, or having to get yourself out of a felony.
Just because you were distracted while driving, 1 of you will die next week. Maybe because you were eating or fumbling with the radio, but let's be real, probably because you were looking at your phone.
Yeah.
If you drive at 60 kilometers an hour or 40 miles an hour and check your phone for just a moment, you've now crossed an entire football field, completely blind. Stop doing this and you might survive next week.
Among Us.
Lastly, we want to have an especially frank word with the 3 of you that will die because you didn't wear a seatbelt. What an incredibly stupid way to die young. Way more of you will get into a car crash and be injured for all the same reasons. And of course, often the victims of crashes are not to blame at all, and many of you watching right now will end up hurting someone else. But you now know how to reduce the chances of this happening massively. Let's move on to other deadly things that you can easily avoid. 26 of you will die by falling, or more precisely by hitting the ground in the next year, which means one of you will die every 2 weeks. You'd think the danger of height was not as big of a deal, but it is. Going up ladders, working on scaffolding or on a roof, and going hiking in nature is normal. But falling from a height of just 2 meters has about the same mechanical energy as a bowling ball dropped from a 7-story building. You probably wouldn't want to be hit by it, and it only gets worse the higher you go. For a fall from 5 meters, the height of a large ladder, the equivalent would be the energy of a bowling ball dropped from a 19-story building.
And not everybody's a Frenchman who's adept at parkour, so you don't exactly know how to disperse the energy from that fall by doing a roll or whatever.
But even just falling over can easily be fatal because your head is all the way at the top of your body.
Yeah.
Another surprisingly dangerous thing is water. One of you will drown next week. Being in and around water is fun and doesn't seem to be a big deal, mainly for 3 reasons. You'll underestimate how dangerous a body of water is and be taken by strong currents or riptides. You'll overestimate your swimming abilities. You're most likely a much worse swimmer than you think.
Here's a crazy fact. You don't even need to get into the water because by the end of summer, actually very close to the end of August this year, we got a lot of messages through the news that we had to be worried of the sand. Why? Because there were these like sand structures that were extremely unstable, where I think the one story had a boy who got buried alive by a bunch of sand, some because the water from the sea was getting underneath the sand and creating these kind of hollow structures underneath, and you could just fall very deep. Like, I know that I'm creating even more existential crises than the video is proposing, but I mean, we are already there, so why not keep at it?
Overestimate your swimming abilities. You're most likely a much worse swimmer than you think. Or, also sadly common, you'll go into the water drunk, especially dangerous because you're more reckless and even more likely to be overwhelmed by a cold shock or hypothermia.
Oof.
Harmless situations around water turn deadly so quickly that in the US, drowning is the second most common cause of death by accident for kids. After, you may have guessed it, car crashes.
Yeah.
So if you're going for a swim next week, keep this in mind. Make sure that the water is safe, assume you are at best a mediocre swimmer, and you won't die. Also, for the love of God, be careful on cruise ships. If you go overboard, you have a 60% chance of dying. Let's move on to the thing that will kill the most people watching this video. This one is extremely sad and very delicate because sensationalist public discussion can make it worse. It's harming yourself. Statistically, about 10 of you could die this way next week. There's something that you might not be aware of that might save your life. The majority of these deaths happen in crisis situations, usually triggered by traumatic events and extraordinary circumstances that overwhelm people and undermine their coping strategies.
Yeah.
Studies show that suicide rarely occurs out of the blue. There are warning signs, and often suicidal thoughts and feelings can be mastered by getting professional help, for example from a crisis intervention center.
It's very important to note what they said there before. They don't just happen either in a vacuum or suddenly. It's built up in a long period. And it can happen to anybody, even people who are living in the happiest countries in the world. And here in Scandinavia, the rate is unfortunately high, with Iceland being the highest one and Finland being a close second, a Nordic country, not Scandinavian. And for some, it ends up being a calculation of whether or not life is worth living, and seeing if they are at a net total good or bad for not just themselves, their family, but for the world around them. And these like waves, and dare I even say a torrent of negative thoughts that you keep on cultivating, can be extremely draining to keep on living with and pretending to be okay with, especially in social settings. Because it sucks the energy out of you to pretend that you're fine when you're not. And when that happens, for some, they end up becoming social recluse. And when you do that, you end up having and cultivating these thoughts, which create extremely strong neural pathways that make these rituals of attempt of self-harm even harder to escape. And I'm able to speak about this a bit more confidently because these are things that I've talked with friends about who were finally able to open about it, and also because this is something that I have experienced myself. It's not a fucking joke. It hurts. It really hurts to feel in a position where you don't think that you are worth living or that you have an out. And even weirder when you cannot fathom how it is that people around you will still care for you, despite the fact that there is a part of you that wants to like inject your thoughts into the mind and even make them agree that this solution will be the best for you and for them. It is a very, very dark path that needs to be dealt with as early as possible. I personally have gotten a lot of good out of talking with actual mental health professionals and, of course, with friends who truly cared. And I know that I'm saying this, and some would be the friend who I have been in a position of, who is often carrying that load of having to suck in the stories of others, and that too can be draining. And I'm not saying that one should be like Lydia from Skyrim and jump over the prospect of carries people burdens. That's not what it is about. It's about being in that position where I consider it to be somewhat of a privilege to know that a person is trusting you so much that they're willing to give their lives in your hands. And it can be a hard responsibility, but it shows truly the love that you can have for your significant other or your friend. So yeah, all that I can say with my yapping session there, I'm sorry, is that you should seek help as quickly as possible. If you have these thoughts, if you have these feelings, if you don't have friends around you who are supportive enough to be willing to listen to you or to drive you to a health professional, call one yourself.
Most people who survive an attempt don't try again and end up being very glad that they did survive. It was just way too much for them, and they felt desperate and as if there was no way out. It would be so nice if someone watching this who's in a bad spot decides to get help. You matter, you really do, and the world is better with you in it. Please stay with us. If you currently feel overwhelmed by life, seeking help is not weakness, it's strength. We've put some resources for you in the video description. This also means another thing. If you have someone in your life going through a crisis, withdrawing, expressing hopelessness, or talking about this topic, even jokingly, take it seriously. Show them that they're loved and important.
Yes.
You personally could save a life, maybe next week already. You might never know, but worst case, you've been a true friend. Now for the final thing, and to be honest, this will not save your life next week, but maybe this year. Cancer is sadly a real risk even for your age group and will kill 5 of you next week. The most common being thyroid, breast and testicular cancer.
Boys, I say this, I know we joke about this all the time. This is specifically addressing the, 92% of my audience who's watching right now. Please, when you reach a certain age, go and have your balls checked. I'm not joking about this.
The author of this video had cancer at the age of 32. If he'd been aware of this risk and went to regular checkups, this could have been entirely avoided. So this is also a personal, heartfelt recommendation. We collected a few resources about screenings and self-checkups in our sources for you. Check them out. At least one type of cancer is almost entirely avoidable.
Melanoma.
Or skin cancer. You might be surprised how deadly this is, but as a great philosopher said, the sun is a deadly laser.
Oh my god, Bill Words. I saw that within an inch of the words the sun being showcased.
It's burning your skin with the energy released from trillions of tons of plasma. The solution couldn't be simpler. Use sunscreen.
Or stay in the
It's
shade.
been a while or you've been in the water. Cool. apply it again. About 9 of you will die of melanoma in the next year, so sunscreen might save your life.
And even for, I'm gonna keep on calling back to that video from the Russian badger.
I've never felt so dumb while playing a video game. And just when I thought I had hit rock bottom dumb, Heavenly told me that black people can sunburn, and it made me feel even dumber.
How did you not know? How? No. No. There's no excuse for not knowing that. Jesus Christ. Yes, even if you're black, use sunscreen. We sunburn too.
Okay, let's wrap up. Just by being more aware and modifying your behavior a little bit, you personally could survive next week. Dozens of all of you watching right now. Hundreds of you this year. Hopefully, you'll be able to tell us stories in the next few years of situations that almost turned really bad, but didn't because you behaved differently.
Yeah.
And if you have people in your life that do or don't do the things we talked about today, please send them this video. It might save their lives too. Life is just the best thing, and we hope to celebrate it together for as long as possible. If you needed a nudge to seize the day, this is it. Start doing the things you want to do today. Run that marathon, write that novel, or become the smartest version of yourself. And while long-distance running and literature may take some time, you can start sharpening your mind right now in minutes a day with our friends at Brilliant.
No, Brilliant can be one of the, I will almost say, only YouTube sponsorship that I will recommend to people.
Signing up through our link will get 20% off an annual membership once their trial ends.
It's good brain food.
2 years ago, the first community-organized Kurzgesagt meetups took place. At more than 200 gatherings, thousands of Kurzgesagt fans all over the world met each other, exchanged ideas, and dreamed about explosions and the end of the universe. And they made friends. And since you all enjoyed it so much, we have to do this again. If you're over 18 and want to take part, visit our temporary subreddit that our community set up for you. Look for your area or city to find a Kurzgesagt meetup near you. And if there isn't one, don't be shy, set one up yourself and meet other wonderful people
I'm gonna have to look this up.
from the Kurzgesagt community. To make this less intimidating, we've created a small toolbox for you. It has some guidance and ideas on what you could do and where you could meet up, as well as conversation starters.
What a nice move from such a nice bird. But yeah, this was a hell of a video, from the mundane to the more sad topic to touch on. But yeah, these are important information I think that we should think about once in a while, and they will most likely save our lives. That being said, guys, thank you so much for checking out this reaction. As always, please do make sure to go and check out the Kurzgesagt channel and subscribe to them as well. They are always a nice catalyst, if not direct source of inspiration for further investigation into science. So highly recommend the channel, and of course like the original video. That being said, wish you all to have a wonderful day, take care of yourselves, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.